once again, welcome to our orientation session today to the Board Chairs Academy Learning Labs program. We've got a very simple agenda today. We're going to spend a little bit of time sharing some context with you about why this training opportunity has been developed and the values and the goals that we have in that process. We'll give you just a general overview of the Board Chairs Academy program overall and spend some time talking about the three particular learning labs coming up this fall in October, November, and December. And then, of course, we'll save some time for your questions as well. So during our learning labs, you'll discover that we often share recent nonprofit research as a way to create context for the topic that we're talking about that particular day. And today we want to highlight some findings from a board source study on nonprofit board practices. I think this came out in 2021, and we're anxiously looking forward to their next study, which is supposed to come out soon. But some examples from that most recent study. Many boards report they're disconnected from the communities and the peoples that they serve. The issue of whether and how to be involved in fundraising can be a distraction, a detraction, if you will, from overall governance performance. Boards report having a hard time increasing their diversity and building the necessary relationships that advance their organization's purpose. And expectations of board performance are not clear. And sometimes when they are clear, they're not enforced. And it's not easy for board chairs to exercise leadership. So is any of this ringing a bell for you? I've heard echoes of this actually in some of the comments that you've already shared. Angelina, thanks for that thumbs up. Are there surprises in any of this, or does this sound like it's familiar? Hannah, I see you nodding. Andrew, thank you. So I think we're all on the same planet here. We are looking at a situation that really helps explain, why Board Chairs Academy exists. And Jeffrey, let me hand the baton to you. Folks, this is Jeffrey Wilcox, the president and CEO of Third Sector Company, to continue our conversation today.
Well, thanks, Randy. Just a quick audio check. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm just so glad to have all of you here. And as I've said in the chat box, many of you are longtime friends and customers of our organization. It is a compliment to have you here. Some of you are meeting for the very first time, and the coffee pot is on. We're glad you're at the kitchen table, and we hope that you'll want to join us again as we just talk about how we as ordinary folks come together to really accomplish something extraordinary in the name of a mission statement. When we started Board Chairs Academy in 2006, and in just a moment, I'll give you the quick rundown about where we came from and why we're here. But when we started in 2006, and about 500 nonprofits later, the boardrooms that we were talking to then and the boardrooms that exist today are two entirely different boardrooms. As you can see from the screen, and being in a post-COVID environment, virtually every not-for-profit organization is challenging the way their boards were, struggled with what their boards had to be, and are now both challenged but also optimistic about what their boards can and should be, what they look like, how board meetings take place, and what an exciting time to embrace what board governance is all about, which is community people stewarding a community asset to be leveraged for the benefit of all. And as you can see from the screen, that's exactly what's happening in home offices and boardrooms all around the country. But Randy, if you go to the next slide, there's also kind of a different way. Many organizations, we used to sit in the board room and sit at the board table. Many organizations are kind of going back to our roots, which was the vast majority of not-for-profit organizations were formed in somebody's living room. They were formed at somebody's kitchen table. They were at a faith community's house of worship. Goodness knows, today we have them, they were over a venti-sized cup of coffee, and you know where that's at. So we have a whole different kind of scene around boards and what they look like and how they work. Well, we want a Board Chairs Academy that isn't a one size fits all because the not-for-profit sector is not an industry. The boards of botanical museums, the boards of community theater companies, the boards of environmental justice organizations, communities who are driven by a set of values that are religious and spiritually based, they are all unique people on a unique mission. This cannot be a one size fits all. What it has to be is a coming together of minds of how ordinary people come together and accomplish something extraordinary in the name of community. Well, I want to tell you for just a moment, Randy, if you go to the next slide, what we have found out is there is a set of values that is an underpinning of virtually every not-for-profit organization. Let's talk about our similarities and then we can celebrate our differences. And actually, everybody, this is the essence of Board Chairs Academy. Let's celebrate what we do together, but also celebrate our differences and how we can learn from that. The brief story of Board Chairs Academy is I'm the former Senior Vice President of the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. And before that, I was the Senior Vice President of the United Way in Phoenix, Arizona. And before that, I started my career at the United Way of King County in Seattle, Washington. And those years with United Way taught me a lot about not-for-profit boards. And the one thing I learned when I was chairing and oversaw the Kellogg Training Center in Southern California, the Kellogg Foundation had something called the Boardwalk Series. You may be familiar with it, but it was a 1980s invention to help not-for-profits learn what they should be doing as good little board people. It didn't work. The reason why is because we can't be too prescriptive when we work in a dynamic. I hope everybody agrees with that. We operate in a dynamic, and it's both our challenge and it is our opportunity. I went to the publisher of the Long Beach Business Journal, and I said to the publisher, how many of your readers probably sit on the not-for-profit boards of Greater Long Beach? And the editor sat across from me and he said, a lot. And I said, how come when I thumb through the Business Journal's pages, you talk about every industry in our community with the exception of nonprofits? And yet these are the folks who sit on our boards. And I'm proud to tell you in 2006, the Board Chairs Academy started as a partnership between the local Business Journal and our organization to bring folks who primarily were the readers of the Business Journal to recognize they have a different business model, they have a different set of pressures, and they have a different set of roles and responsibilities from their corporations when they sit in community. And our stance on that has not changed and will not change. And I'm happy to tell you what's the commonalities. Randy, come back to the slides. Here's the three things that we know. Governance, no matter how it's defined, is an act of stewardship. We are volunteers who have a stewardship role for an organization because we stand on the shoulders of other people who wanted to see something done. And we are an important link between an organization's past and its future to ensure that it continues in its proper form in modern society. Number two, we also recognize that virtually every nonprofit started as a movement before it was an organization. It was a group of people who said, yes, we can, yes, we will, and just watch us do it. And by virtue of that, the movement turned into an organization. This academy is based on our proudful roots that we opened our doors, we formed our 501c3s, and we became known entities because there were a group of people who took an idea and moved it through the community, and that movement represented an infrastructure called our nonprofit. And at the end of the day, what people look to us for is, did we create the impact that our words say we're supposed to? No matter what we do, I hope I'm not causing heartburn for anybody this early after breakfast, that no matter what organization you're with, we are people with a stewardship obligation to mobilize people to achieve something they want to see happen together. And we have a community who's standing by watching us not just do busy work, but actually make a difference. Randy, can I see full screen for just a second?
Sure.
Does this resonate with you? We're stewards of a movement to create impact. Does that create commonality for diverse people from around this nation for the next 10 minutes? You know, if only we began every board meeting by reminding people, we're here as stewards, everybody. We're here because we've got to mobilize And we've got to keep ourselves in tap that all of us are creating impact, not just the folks on the payroll, that all of us are creating impact. So how, Jeffrey, okay, that sounds philosophically nice. Let's talk about the academy. So what do you teach in 6 sessions? Well, the whole goal here is that there has to be a sense of cohesiveness that is created amongst diverse people. We can't chair boards and celebrate our diversity if we don't also create our cohesiveness that hears voices and lets every person be valued. But we have to build consensus amongst diverse people as well. And that's difficult, particularly in today's political environment in the year that we're in. We must never forget we have to model the purpose that we espouse, that we represent. The moment we stop walking our talk, what will happen to our nonprofit organization? We have to affirm that every perspective is important in community, but we have to evolve with the community. Shame on us as board people who try to be the organization that was, as opposed to excited about the organization that can be, as our community continues to become more contemporary. And finally, the truth is, everybody, and I don't know if this is true for you, we live in such an isolated world today that for a lot of people, they sit on our boards, and it's the one sense they may have of actually feeling unisolated, feeling connected, that they matter and that they belong. And not-for-profit boards have played important roles in our communities for even the most isolated people to be reminded that when they get into the room with other community people, they matter. And that what they contribute to the community matters. This organization and what we do together matters. Our goals, cohesion, consensus, purpose with perspective, evolution, and belonging. Randy, next slide. Let me just say then, so the thing that did not work for me, and this is just one person's opinion, the thing that didn't work to me of all the board training I was exposed to at United Way is it was all a how-to, how to do this and how to do that. That didn't work for me. It wasn't so much the process of governance that I think mattered. What was important was the outcomes of governance. Because what happens at the Center for Spiritual Living, what happens at Lutheran Social Services, what happens at Executive Service Corps, that is all unique to all of your organizations. What we're all trying to do, though, is come up with a process that has 6 outcomes. And everybody, if this is your takeaway from today's little show, this is it on the screen. Feel free to take a screenshot if you would like. But what happens is our academy is based on 6 principles. Number 1, we are causes, and we spend an entire session talking about what is different between leading an organization and leading a cause. And mind you, I don't think they're exactly the same. Leading an organization versus leading a cause. Number 2, what it means to mobilize, what it means to be a movement. Organizations that are not moving are not alive. They are stagnant. Governance has to make sure that the organization is moving, is mobilized. Number 3, in the old days when I was getting started in this business, we had a word called fiduciary. And I think we stood just a little more erect and we put our hand over our chest and we said, it's our fiduciary responsibility. Well, I don't want to take away from those golden years of governance, but the fact of the matter is today we talk about a resilient organization. Because you may have money in the bank and have absolutely no equity in the community. How fiduciary is that? It is a matter of we have to ensure as boards, we're a resilient organization based on all of our assets. And some are monetary and some are non. Number 4, that we are getting impact. As a board, we have to make sure that we are walking our talk. Number 5, this is one of my favorite ones. If boards aren't preparing the next generation to take over, who is? If we're standing on the shoulders of folks, who's going to stand on our shoulders? Or is it the staff's responsibility to go find that? I don't think the academy is going to buy that, because we had a board before we had executive directors. As boards, we had one of the things that we had to do was hire one, and we still have to do that. And finally, at the base of this picture, is we have to have an infrastructure of paid and unpaid people. And you know what? In some organizations, that's a lot, and in some, it's a few. But the equation is still the same. Paid and unpaid people have to work with each other in an equitable, accountable, and an inclusive way if we're truly going to make sure that the sum is greater than any of its parts. Everybody, the Board Chairs Academy is about how do you lead a cause? How do you mobilize a movement? How do you recognize your responsibility to resiliency? How do you ensure that you're creating impact, getting the next generation to take over, and we're all working together in a way that makes sense for the community to get what they expect from us?
Okay, Jeffrey, thank you. So let's get down to brass tacks now. We've been setting context as we promised we would. So now let's get into the details about the Board Chairs Academy program and how you can engage with aspects of that. Just basically, we at Board Chairs Academy want to be available to you as a year-round board training and consulting resource. The Academy is designed to be as flexible as possible for the needs that your board may have or that a board that you know about may have. So let's see if I can get my button to work here to go to the next slide. Here we go. And this is what that looks like. In late 2024 and early 2025, we're going to be offering 6 different learning labs. I'm looking at the first column here, each on a specific topic that's critical to effective board performance. And we're going to talk more about each of those topics in just a minute. So these learning labs are public learning events. They're open to everybody. Anybody who wants to register can, and they're facilitated by a team of experienced nonprofit board specialists who make up the Academy faculty. As you can see, these are scheduled monthly from October through March, and you can register for a single learning lab or for all of them or for any combination. Organizations can get a discount if they register 4 or more people for a given lab. Let me take just 2 seconds here to grab some information that I had set aside before about the cost, because I know that that's a relevant question for you. So here we go, put this into the chat. So if these pre-scheduled labs don't work for your calendar, then let's move to the middle column. We can bring the Academy directly to your organization's boardroom. We call that Board Chairs Academy to go. So that's, again, a choice of any of these 6 topics that can be delivered online very easily, in some cases even on location and scheduled at your board's convenience. So if you want to talk about that, please let me know and we'd be happy to explore that with you. And then we're also available to offer support outside the classroom, if you will. Our Academy faculty members and other practitioners in our professional services network can be ready to help with any customized training or consulting that your board may need. So are there any questions about this overview before we talk more specifically about the 6 topics? Okay, I'm seeing none. Everybody looks like they're with us. Okay, great. So on to the specific topics for October, November, and December. I mentioned in the chat that our October Learning Lab is all about leadership succession planning. And that is more than just how are we going to fill a blank or a vacant executive director position if and when that comes about. When you come to that particular session, you'll hear from us that leadership succession is really an organization-wide cultural approach to the sustainability of your mission and your cause going forward. So it's not about a particular position. That's part of it, but it's much broader than that. And it includes, as Jeffrey had commented before, it includes some conversation about how do we create a pipeline for board leadership? How do we create leadership continuity within our board as well as within the organization itself? So that's on October the 11th. In November, we'll have a session about the board's role in resource development, fundraising. It's an interesting follow-on to the October session because actually people are the most important resource that we have in leadership succession. Is all about developing our people. Well, let's move to another resource in November, developing the financial resources that we need to advance the cause. And what is the board's role in that process? So that's one of the more popular sessions that we offer. And then in December, we're going to be talking about how do we move from boards that are operating in a fiduciary way into operating more strategically, and then beyond that into operating more generatively. And the generative board is the board who looks at questions of not what do we do about this problem, but why does this problem exist, and how can we frame this problem in a process, in a discussion, in a strategy that will help us move forward in a more cohesive, more community-based, more comprehensive way. So how do we evolve? How do we create innovation within the boardroom? So that's what's on tap in December. And then in the first 3 months of 2025, we have plans for these 3 topics. We mentioned at the beginning of the session today that governance is really stewardship of a cause, and that's a foundational learning lab that's a great place for any board to plug into this process. In February, we'll be talking about board development. How can the board take a comprehensive approach to understanding what are the optimal attributes of the board for our cause? What kind of board do we need? What kind of board will help us move forward most effectively in the community? And then what are the steps, what are the strategies that we can pursue to achieve whatever that vision of our board is? Here are some steps to achieve that. And then in March, we'll look at that key issue of what is the optimal relationship between the board and the executive, whether you call that executive an executive director or a chief executive officer. What does that partnership look like? What are the challenges with that, and how do we rise above those challenges to really leverage that partnership for the good of our cause and for the good of our community? Any questions that folks have about the particular topics? I'll swing back to the last slide so that you can see succession planning in October, the board and fundraising in November, evolving a generative board that's innovative in December, governance and stewardship in January, board development in February, and the board executive relationship in March. Any questions? I'm going to hand things over to Jeffrey to continue, and then what I'm going to do while he's talking is I'm going to throw into the chat a link that will take you to the Board Chairs Academy website, which itself has links to all of these individual topics, or at least the first 3 topics. We haven't posted the last 3 yet for scheduling, but the first 3 are available to sign up, and I'll put that link in the chat for you shortly. Jeffrey, next, back to you now.
Thanks, Randy. So let's just talk about what happens when we all get in the room. If that's what we're going to talk about, we're going to call that the what. How does this whole thing work? So first and foremost, the Board Chairs Academy was actually designed based on a model called cohort learning. We do welcome individuals. We want it to be a very full and learning experience for the individual. But the real value of Board Chairs Academy is having a couple of other board members with you, the executive director, or someone on staff who we are preparing for the next generation of leadership for our organization. This curriculum was designed because it's rooted in discussing content, and then how does that apply to our situation? And it's really through conversation that the magic of the Academy occurs. On the screen is a little bit of a cycle. It's not box 1, 2, 3. It's not as quite as orderly as it might appear, but this is what happens. We've spent a lot of time creating a participant guide so that all of our ideas are contained in a spiral bound edition of a workbook, but there are also individual PDFs available so that you can actually walk through step by step everything that's talked about in the slides that you see. There is some pre-reading material. Now, we've been around long enough to know that the number of people who actually have time for pre-reads isn't great, but it is referenced that you may actually have a little more of an enthusiasm to read after the program than before. Either way, there's a lot of good literature out there. We've tried to do the heavy lifting of providing some literature we think is worth our time. Number 2, obviously, we do want to deliver content. This is not purely a roundtable. This is not purely organic. We want to bring to the table our scar tissue, our victories, what we've learned. Having been the role I had in United Way, I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of boards on a daily basis. So we wanted to bring content delivery, but I might add, it is uniquely ours. This is not an academy where we've pulled a whole bunch of stuff off the shelf. We do look to Board Source. We do look to the National Council on Nonprofits. We do look to our partners in service. But a lot of the content that you are receiving is the lived experience of the people who are teaching. Number 3, every single session is the word I'm looking for. Every single session of the Academy includes a little bit of a self-assessment. It's one of those magazine kind of quizzes that my father hated my mother opening up a monthly magazine and insisting he take upon arrival. But it is an assessment to say, okay, how is our organization stacking up in these areas? And that creates some discussion in every single session. How are we really doing about the board's role in fundraising? How are we doing in really creating an optimal relationship with our staff and management? The 4th box on the screen, we also want to have people tell their stories. That means board chairs, executive directors, others who stand with us in this work somewhere around the country to talk about, you know what, we made some big mistakes, everybody, and this is what they were. Or we had some ahas, and this is what we had. And then finally, there's conversation. We do a lot of breakout work so that your fellow board members and you have a chance to talk about what's just happened. And one of the things is we are as much a learning organization as a teaching organization. And here's the difference. The learning organization comes back to you and says, I don't want to know what you talked about. What I want to know about is what you learned from one another. And that's a very different question. We're constantly saying, what did we learn from one another through this process? And that's what we want to provide to you every time we get together. As I said, Randy, on the next page, you could order our workbook that contains all of these assessments, put them into a copy machine and use them at a board meeting, use it as part of a retreat, invite us to help you do that in a facilitated role. But there is a workbook that actually brings some method to this madness. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to Randy at this point, but that's our academy. We've designed it because of customers like you, and we will continue after the next academy to continue to create it so that we're giving you exactly what you came for. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Randy, back to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, thank you all again. We'll go ahead and bring this session to a close. Please be in touch. We hope to see you again and
Yes.
be in dialogue with you as you and your organizations advance your respective causes. Thank you so much.